welcome to Main Pod Girl.
This is a podcast made by popheads for popheads.
Every episode, y'all can check in with us while we discuss your burning questions, as well as what's happening in pop music.
Throughout this series, we'll be chiming in on our favorite recent discussion threads and chatting with some of our all-time favorite artists and music commentators.
Hey, Happy New Year! I'm an alt-pop artist, songwriter, and the parental advisory sticker's worst nightmare, Sola Ginto. That's right, I got a last name now, y'all.
And I'm a pop rock artist, songwriter, and not so innocent, AJ Marks.
Oh.
Came up with that one on the fly because I forgot to write one down.
Oh, wow. All on your own.
Very on theme with today's topic, which we will get into in a second. But first, we're really excited to introduce today's guest. They're a comedian, a film buff with a master's degree in screenwriting, can't forget, and the co-host of my favorite podcast, The Bechdel Cast, which covers the representation of people of marginalized genders in film. At the end of 2022, I said that it'd be a dream to have them join the pod, and look at us now. First episode of 2023 with our guest, Caitlin Durante.
Woo! Wow, and here I am hitting you babies one more time.
Yes. There we go.
Yes.
So today we're going to be talking about Good Girls Gone Bad and that kind of trope. But before we start, do we want to kick it off with a little icebreaker?
Yes. So we normally do a little icebreaker on this show where we talk about what we're listening to music-wise. But this time, because you're here, Caitlin, we thought, why don't we talk about what like good TV shows or movies we've seen recently? Like, what do we need to add to our watch lists?
So this holiday season, I actually watched movies again and really felt like the holidays because I actually got to see things in theaters. And I saw Bros, The Menu, and Glass Onion. Glass Onion, I unfortunately didn't get to see in theaters, but it was good that I at least got to see it because Knives Out is one of my favorite films of all time. And I was just really, really excited for the sequel. Menu was okay. I thought technically it was brilliant. Everything except for the story was great, which made the story kind of stick out more a little bit.
Why is this story about like Guy Fieri?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Yeah, okay. Flavor Town?
Kind of, yeah. Just a very intense version.
I've gone back and I've seen some films that I'd never seen before that I definitely should have seen in the past. Like I'm on a organized crime.
You're part of organized crime?
You're a mob boss? Oh my gosh.
I'm on a mob boss kick right now. So I'd never seen Quentin Tarantino films before. And I know that that's like, whoa, what? How are you a human being? How are you an adult human? Barely. I saw Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, all of that stuff. I still need to watch Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yeah, I need to see that too. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Mark your spoilers. I saw Snatch. I don't know if you guys have seen Snatch.
Oh, I know Snatch very well.
Oh, did you like it?
Well, I saw it for the first time in an era of my life where I was like knee deep in like loving just toxic masculinity in movies. Which has honestly spanned my entire life, unfortunately. And I love a heist movie.
Yeah, I love a heist film.
I liked the cast and like Guy Ritchie movies. I had watched that and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels back to back. And I was like, these are the best freaking movies. This was like 2006, maybe. So I haven't seen Snatch in probably maybe like a decade, but I don't know if it holds up, but I did stand by it for a while.
I would say I liked it.
Yeah.
But also I understand you know you're not learning any life lessons when watching Snatch.
Yeah.
But
sure.
But it was just like, pure sort of fun.
Yeah.
And then I also saw Nope. Have you seen Nope yet?
Yeah.
Very good. I made sure that everything, like all the blinds were closed, all the lights were off, and the entire flat.
I love doing that.
Yeah, it was great.
I used to shove a lamp underneath my bed and then turn it on because it would create this like really nice mood lighting.
You felt like you were in the UFO? Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Spoilers. Sorry.
No, yeah, sorry. Spoilers.
Wow.
Nope. If you don't know what it's about.
Oops. Mute the podcast now. What about you, Caitlin? What do we need to add to our watch lists?
To our letterbox.
Yes.
So my 3 favorite movies of 2022 we'll go with some recent hits. One was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes.
This is, I think everyone's favorite film of last year. Or, I don't know, not to put everyone in a box, but it was a beloved movie.
Everyone who's seen it.
I'm not original.
I still haven't seen it because it sounds very overwhelming.
It is.
The title sounds very overwhelming.
It's rather fast-paced, certainly.
I like that.
But great movie, beloved movie. I'm not original for liking it. Another of my favorites from 2022 was the movie RRR.
Ooh.
A movie from India that is just, oh my God. And speaking of music, the music is just doing so much in this movie. And it's a great soundtrack, a great score. Wild movie.
Didn't it just win a Golden Globe?
It did, for original song.
Like over Rihanna and Taylor and Lady Gaga? Yeah.
So it's in Telugu, not Hindi. So it's, from my understanding, Bollywood is exclusively Hindi language films. This is in Telugu, so it's Tollywood. And then there's also I want to say maybe 4 or 5 other pretty major movie industries in India, all dedicated to a different major language there.
Oh,
So
I feel like we're going to run out
I'm not an
of
expert.
letters. Like it's going to
Yes.
be like Dollywood, Hollywood, Bollywood, Tollywood.
Yeah.
And then we'll eventually get there.
And then that's kind of it. But it's just a wild action. It's just like everything dialed up to an 11, and I love it, and it's awesome. And then my third favorite movie of the year was Puss in Boots.
No
The
Yes.
way.
Last Wish.
No way.
It rocks. It rocks and rolls.
Really? How come?
Visually, it's amazing. The animation is great. The story is just tight and funny. The jokes land. The themes and the messaging are very compelling and heartwarming. The characters are fun. It's a great movie.
I know. I'm so excited to see it. I told my sister I'd wait to be with her again so we could see it together.
Aww.
Also, not to rewind, but rewinding slightly, I've just looked up RRR, and I totally knew what you were talking about because I know this director because I've seen Bahubali. Have you seen Bahubali?
I have seen parts of it, but I need to watch both films all the way through.
Yes. Anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, again, this is just the most extra films in every single way. And
Yes.
if you just Google or YouTube search some Bahubali fight scenes, you will see defying physics, defying anything known to human understanding within one sort of action scene. And it's fantastic. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
So now I need to watch RRR.
We love a technical definition of camp.
Yes.
Taking it back into the technical term.
But also, it doesn't make any sense. It does. It makes sense. But at the same time, so much is happening and so much is they're epics.
There's a lot of suspension of disbelief you have to do.
And I'm suspending it.
Yeah.
But you're going to love doing it.
Yes. You're going to love every moment of it. Add to your watch list, folks. You're not ready for Bahubali.
So now we have our main topic of the episode, which is the good girl gone bad trope. This is something that, as a film buff with a master's in screenwriting that you hate to talk about.
That I would never mention. So thank you for bringing it up.
Never
for me.
bring up. Yeah. I brought it up for you. I knew you would hate to bring it up yourself.
I appreciate that.
So I figured perfect episode collaboration to do would be to talk about tropes that we see play out in music. These are things that obviously happen in films a lot too, but seeing them happen in real time with real people and real stakes, things where you can't control the outcome, things where you can't control the public's reaction, analyzing the public's reaction, and then taking that back into art and then making art about things like that with all these new biopics and stuff. So,
But also, are we controlling the public's reaction? That's a question we will also maybe delve into.
well, yeah, it's just basically can you control it? Can you not? But I just want to make it clear that for this, there will obviously be a lot of women that we were talking about that are at the center of this episode. I want to make it clear to all the listeners that this is not us being critical of these women. We don't know anything more than what we are shown and what we are given and what's public information. And also, it's more of a media critique
100%.
and a audience response critique and what that tells us about different generations and where we are in terms of feminism.
We also might not have all the answers. I don't think this is going to be we're answering all your questions about about, the good girl gone bad trope. It's more of a discussion about the reasons for it, the responses to it, and how we can do better as a society with regard to these individuals, these responses, and especially in the modern era, we have some work to do. There's a lot of work to do. Just wanted to say that.
There's still miles to go. And that sounds great, but I was hoping to mansplain feminism to everyone. So if you could just, that's what this episode is all about.
Can you shut up, Sola? Please mansplain.
Yes. All right. Well, we have 3 ways that we kind of thought of that are classic tropes, classic ways to go from the quote unquote good girl to the quote unquote bad girl in the public eye. And the first one is sexualization. So whether it's self-sexualization, whether it's being sexualized against your will, I guess, there's a lot that goes into it. This kind of seems like the most obvious one too, but immediately things that come to mind are like Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus, Christina Aguilera.
In the modern era, especially.
I have a question for the group, for the crowd.
For the class.
Question for the class. A lot of the good girls gone bad that we will be talking about in this episode were all child stars. And specifically when it comes to sexualization, I'm curious on what you guys think about how much that is based in the fact that we're watching people grow up. Naturally, if you watch anyone grow up and you'll watch them be sexualized, whether they're doing it themselves or whether it's just they're naturally getting older and they're more interested in sex and whatever. But it's interesting because when you watch someone grow up in the public eye, it almost feels like you're not supposed to see certain things. You're not it feels like people should just go away for a while and then come back as a fully grown adult. How much do you feel like growing up in the public eye just kind of makes it inevitable that people are going to be sexualized, and how do we kind of deal with that?
Yeah, it's a lot to ponder. What I find fascinating about the good girl gone bad trope, at least for the artists who, because I wasn't Britney Spears was not on my radar when she was like a child. Was she on? Because I grew up without cable and I didn't watch Disney things or Nickelodeon things. So the Mickey Mouse
she was Disney
Club.
I think you still had to pay for Disney at that point.
Oh, yeah, it was.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't have access to it. So all of those child stars that came out of that, or Nickelodeon child stars, and then they got famous as teenage, or they continued to be famous, or whatever their career went on a different trajectory as teenagers. I was like, who's this new person? And everyone's like, they're already famous. I'm like, oh. But so point is, I only knew about Britney Spears when her album started coming out as a teenager. So what I found fascinating about her, for example, is she was marketed as a good girl in her first album, maybe into the second one, but especially that first one with Hit Me Baby One More Time, the schoolgirl outfit. But there's a conundrum there because that image was also so hypersexualized that it was a bad good girl image. I don't know how to explain it, but I wonder if from the moment she hit puberty, it was all right, we're gonna sexualize this still a child, but we're gonna frame her in these surrounded by more innocent quote unquote iconography. We're gonna put her in a fuzzy scrunchie or put have her holding a pencil with a big eraser on it, just the stuff that kids do, or that they did in the late 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're but we're also going to sexualize the hell out of her. And isn't that awesome? I don't know if I have a point here exactly, but it's just something.
I don't think there will be many points on this show to be on this episode, to be fair, but that totally resonates with me. But also at the same time, one thing to keep in mind was that she was also publicly a virgin during those times. And if you remember, your Jessica Simpsons, your Britneys, your Christinas, your Mandy Moores, all at that time were very innocent public virgins or publicly trying to be sort of Christian. And I think that maybe allowed for some parents to be okay with it, because they knew oh well, they're still, you know, good girls, but so you can listen to their songs and stuff. And then I don't know what the appeal would have been for young girls. Maybe just that feeling of just wanting to be desired by the boys in their class or things like that. And so it played that fantasy in their head or something.
Right.
Like I'm not exactly sure, but I find it really interesting that there's that like sort of fetishizing of virgins and young girls, and there's so much involved in it, and like all the iconography, like you were saying.
I was going to say that kind of what you were sending me and talking to me about before the podcast started, with how like they wanted to get it like parent approved so that the kids grew up with the teens and grew up with the artists. But then also I think what kids want, or what kids were trained to want, was to, I mean, there's a certain age in which you want to rebel, you want to be edgy, you want to push boundaries. You're just like naturally designed to want to go against what your parents want, which I think that's like 14, 15, I think is the age for that biologically. But you were also sharing an article with me before this, Sola, about how it was like very much designed, women's sexuality in music was designed to come across as agency. So if it's if there are connotations with agency and sexuality, then if you're marketing this to young girls and saying this is what agency looks like, this is what owning, you know, your sexuality, this is what owning yourself looks like, then they're kind of almost like gaslit to want that, I guess.
Right. And that brings up something else. And this is a whole societal problem, not just in pop music or media. It's just everything, everywhere, all at once. Is
overwhelming.
Call back.
Just the policing of girls and women's sexuality and all of the double standards attached to that, and the idea that to be someone who can even be taken seriously as a person with a female body, you have to be sexually desirable to men, or else what purpose do you serve? But if you have agency over your own sexuality, oops, you're a slut.
Yep.
But if you surrender that agency and that control and let other people sexualize you, then that's ideal by society's standards. So there's all these different, like, it's a whole disaster. But because like there are pop stars, I hope, who their sexualization or their like perceived sexuality as a performer was completely on their terms. Well, maybe, I don't know if the industry even allows that, because the industry does so much to control artists' images. But in an ideal world, you have an artist who, like, if they want to present as a very like sexual being and they're using sexuality as like part of their appeal and it's on their terms, great, more power to them. But I feel like it so rarely happens that way. But the world sucks, is what I'm saying.
The world sucks, and it's contradictory, and it doesn't give you a good roadmap.
Especially the Western world. Like, I feel in the West specifically, I can't really speak to other parts of the world on this, but like our media, like as soon as you're 18, pretty much before even like 17, 16, like as soon as you're able to have sex, you are almost expected to be sort of sexually available to media. And none of these artists live in a vacuum. And it's interesting sometimes how the conversation is, like how conversations are had about these artists as if they don't adhere to any of these societal pressures or anything like that. Especially artists today who are in their 20s or younger, they grew up in the environment of all of these past artists who were either self-sexualized or objectified by society. And so there's like an expectation. Also, a lot of studies have shown that girls who see people being sexualized in their media will just start also replicating that, obviously. Like it makes sense. It's sort of like, you know, intuitive. And so especially these people who grew up within media and within these spaces, I feel like it's almost inevitable for there to be some sort of sexualizing. Like even people like Billie Eilish, who chose to wear baggy clothes in order to avoid that, had the website like not that she made, but there was a website that was like a countdown clock for her to turn 18, so that everyone who followed that clock felt okay to start sexualizing her publicly.
Ugh.
And there's so much stuff like that. Millie Bobby Brown.
And there have been so many of those like countdown clocks.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
The Olsen twins. Like,
It's so gross.
ugh.
It's interesting, like where the line is between like owning your body and publicly expressing yourself how you want, like how Rihanna did when she came into adulthood. And, you know, it's sort of widely known that she was at the helm of her becoming more publicly sexual and her sort of like sexual imagery and whatnot. The title of this episode.
The literal album title, Good Girl Gone Bad.
Yes. So like, I don't know, like it's so hard to know where the line is.
Going back to our earlier question and also what you were talking about just then, I feel like it might be a marriage of both, I guess, girls wanting to grow up faster than they should, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that when we're kids, like my sisters, their main thing was like they always wanted to be swiping credit cards because they thought it was so much fun. They would always pretend that they were swiping credit cards or serving in a restaurant or whatever.
Or like snorting pixie sticks. Did you ever have that? Was that
Yeah, snorting pixies, that the whole, yeah.
I used to drink ginger ale and have like those big thick pretzel rods and pretend the pretzel rod was a cigar and the ginger ale was beer. And I was like, I'm smoking and I'm drinking. And I was like 10 or something.
why do we do this?
I had palm in a wine glass. But yeah, so I think it might be a mixture of that and then also how well it sells, you know, like
Sex sells.
if you are selling to a teen girl audience, you want someone that they want to admire, they want to be. It's like that whole like everyone wanted to be her or be with her. Mm-hmm. So it's like it like adheres to both the male gaze and to like some sort of ambitions. And because there's youth involved, it's like people aren't able to untangle that up until much later in their lives. And it's like if it's done publicly, there's still all that history out there that's still held against them when they're in their 20s. If they become a lot more sexual and they used to be innocent, it's held against them. If they're, because like people who are not famous or don't have their past carried around with them all the time will like be in high school and have a certain set of people who know them for that, and then go to college, and then your best friends keep in touch with you through college, and then you get a whole new set, not that everyone goes to college, but or you go into a job or something and you get a whole new set of people who know you. And it's like you're allowed to be someone different or find yourself or be a little bit more sexual or whatever. And then you go into adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you get different stages and different people who know you at different times. And the people who stay with you are the people who are not judgy, whatever. But I feel like being famous, especially from so young, you get to just watch, you could even watch something on YouTube. Someone probably made a compilation of like this person every year as they grow up. And then it's just like weird if you didn't even know them as a kid and then you get to watch them grow up in front of you. It's just kind of strange. But it's especially strange if you did grow up with them.
But why would we sexualize people more? Like sort of reflecting on your question. Why would we want to sexualize Hermione? You know, why was that a thing?
Wait, what? Did people sexualize Hermione?
Yes.
Because people are gross.
Oh, gross. Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry, I wasn't aware of that, but that's nasty.
Yes, in the latter movies, they were like, "Ooh, Emma Watson. Ooh, Hermione. Let me slither in."
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a little too. That's a little too clever to not have already been a thing. So I completely believe that was a big thing, just from that.
Because it has been so normalized to sexualize young people who are legally still children, and that has largely been accepted. And it's only been in like pretty recent years that anyone has really started to challenge that in a mainstream way. And it's still a problem that very young people, like Millie Bobby Brown is a perfect example, are still being sexualized. There are people who, even though like nothing she's doing on Stranger Things is like tantalizing to anyone, but people, and I'm referring to cis het men especially, are just,
we're looking at you.
And I'm not saying
not me. I'm not het, so
not all. not hashtag not all men, but like there's a large number of really gross people who are like, oh, I think she's hot, even though she's 13 or whatever. Like it's just been so normalized and so culturally accepted to be attracted to children.
Yeah, like that Matthew McConaughey quote in that film.
Oh wait, which one?
The thing I like about high schoolers is like, I keep getting older and they stay the same age or something like that.
Yeah.
That was, I really butchered it. I tried to do my best, Matthew McConaughey, but
is that Dazed and Confused? Maybe
something like that. That sounds right.
Yeah,
we'll go with that.
Yeah, don't fact check this.
No one correct us.
Yeah. So it's just the point is it's just so culturally acceptable, and it has gone so unchallenged to sexualize young people. Mm-hmm. No wonder this happens all the time in music and media in general.
Maybe it's like sort of tied to the idea of like people just like taboos, you know? Like it's like when you see this person and you're growing up with them, it's almost like, ooh, like I'm being a little naughty, like, you know, liking them, like sort of like the step sister fantasy, you know, or like the stepmom fantasy that's like so popular in porn genres. Perhaps there's some sort of psychological tie-in to this whole like attraction to what we shouldn't do or what we shouldn't feel. That's exacerbated by media and culture.
And porn itself.
Yeah.
Big chicken or the egg there.
Mm-hmm.
Just like allowing us the freedom to sexualize these people that don't have any choice in it and are far too young to make that decision. So... Yay.
Yeah. I think earlier, I guess my point was that I think that it's both the artist's agency having not really the life experience to know better, and the fact that it sells well and plays well for record execs, so they're not going to be like, no, you can't sexualize yourself as a kid when you're underage or whatever. So I think
the teams pressure them.
It's like a win-win, but then it's not. It's like a win-win in the moment. And again, it's like, I know that like a lot of artists surprisingly have a lot of agency. I know that when we were talking to JoJo on this podcast, and the fact that she was like 14, 15, 16, and she had way more agency about her image and her music than we like expected.
But I did find an article that said that JoJo, that her old record label told her that she wasn't sexy enough for them to promote her music.
Yep.
So...
Which is gross because she was 14, 15, 16.
Yes. So it's like there's agency and then there's not. At the same time, it's like give and take in big ways.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the male gaze is definitely like a big reason, because we were saying earlier, why would someone want to...
And not GAYS, GAZE.
Oh, yeah. Male. Yeah. I was like, what? Not gays? Yes. Not gays, plural. The GAZ. Exactly.
We're looking at you, pop heads.
But then also I want to move on to a related but similar topic about artists outside of the Britney sphere who are ultra good girls promoted that way on Disney, like Miley, that move into very sexual phases to complete the good girl gone bad trope. And I'm curious what expectations are even subverted by having this image change, because people are always saying that they're surprised or they can't believe that like Hannah Montana, this is what she looks like now. But I'm just like, what did you expect? She like grew up. You thought she was going to be Hannah Montana until she was what, fucking 40? Like in my head, I'm like, that seems very weird. You know, people always praise Hilary Duff for not having a scandal. I'm not coming for Hilary Duff, don't worry.
We love you.
But people praise Hilary Duff for not having a scandal. People praise JoJo for not having a scandal. And Miley has had a lot of actual scandals. When people refer to her in scandals, it's usually just her having some sexual agency. And I don't think that that's a bad thing when she's like 20, 21, and she's trying to actually, like, you can tell she's not even trying to appeal to the male gaze with that whole foam finger thing. Like, that to me was just like her rebelling against the squeaky clean image she had before. But I don't know if that's just me, but at least in my eyes, I saw a lot of agency and a lot of rebellion that I related to in that age at that time. And that's why I was like really, really into her music in like 2013, 2014. But I'm curious what you guys think. Like, why are people surprised by this? And what would be the alternative that they would expect?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what to make of that because there's also a tendency to see artists and performers, actors, musicians, etc., as a commodity rather than a person, as a brand rather than a person. So if you see someone, and again, it's almost always a very cultivated image, a very cultivated brand and commodity, and your brain just is like, oh, well, this is this type of this is this.
Yeah.
And whenever that person, matures a bit and comes of age and, enters their 20s and like is in adulthood and able to like do adult things, people are like, what? I thought she was Hannah Montana. Like it doesn't compute for a lot of people because how these images and these brands that are human people, but they're not delivered to us that way. They are not presented to us that way. They're presented as a brand. So like I feel like so many people's brains cannot compute that they are a human with interior lives, and they are not just their public facing persona. Or even when their public facing persona does change, they're like, but I thought, I don't know what it is psychologically, but it's just the way that like marketing brainwashes us. I feel like it just has something to do with that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Also, we're as a society, we're really bad on a whole with nuance. And,
true.
So I think
it's so difficult to get nuance on a broad scale, though. I will say that. I feel like even if we tried our best, I feel like it's so difficult to have those conversations.
We've gotten a lot better at nuance, I think, as a society over the years.
But then we also have Twitter still.
Yeah, we're still trash.
Again, the world sucks. I've said it before. I'll say it again.
Yeah, the world sucks. We're trash.
It's the point of the episode.
This episode will be called Human Garbage. I think that like we're
in an episode all about women.
we're bad. Yes, that'll go down well. We're feminists, I swear.
The nuance.
I think we're just bad at nuance as a whole, and so like any diversion from the brand that you were talking about, Caitlin, and like that sort of established narrative in our head, it just like gives us cultural whiplash. Yeah, I don't know how we solve that. I think media plays a really big role in all of this entire conversation, like how publications spoke about these people, I'm sure influences how we see them as well. Word choice is incredibly important and can, even if it seems like a really neutral article, if you see specific wording, they're probably subliminally trying to tell you something, whether the author knows it or not, because they're also humans who are fallible and are writing just their own opinion pieces or whatever. But then, calling Miley, I'm sure people called her a slut, in media.
Yep. People called her crazy a lot, which is not a word I like, but
but also shout out Gnarls Barkley. But I think there's that's an old joke for the real ones.
Oh, I thought you were about to explain I thought you were about to explain the joke to us.
No. Also shout out Doechii. But I think I don't know what expectations are subverted, to answer your question really poorly, but I just think that there is a lot of nuance that is unattainable in the conversation that we were having at the time, or was unattainable at the time. I'm not sure how we solve this problem. I think it's just a human problem until we all have like a sort of consciousness, a higher consciousness, not to be super Californian about it, but I think that there is an aspect to that. But sort of on the flip side, what expectations do you think are like subverted when someone has a more sexual image when they're entering their 30s, or like maybe not subverted, but just like how do you think society perceives that? Because I feel like people who are entering adulthood who have sexual images as artists, and then people who are like, say BB Rexa or Lizzo or Gwen Stefani when she was, leaving No Doubt and doing her solo thing, like there's a different sort of connotation to sexualizing at that age.
Yeah. When you brought up flipping the script in terms of expectations, I thought you were going to say like male expectations, which I want to get to, but the going into their 30s, I think that's even being pushed back on now with having artists like Lizzo and SZA who are several years over 30 and are extremely sexual. But I think that's even being pushed back on a lot. But I know that, like, obviously with Madonna in her 60s, you know, everyone was kind of using that as a thing against her about like wearing a bra like she had done her entire career, where they're like, you can't do that anymore. It's like, why? Why not?
I don't know about public perception, but at least my perception when I see someone in their 30s presenting in a sexual way as an artist, my perception is that, oh, this was probably on their own terms, because they are as someone myself who is famously in their 30s, well into my 30s, you just have the maturity and the, I don't know, I reached an age recently where I was just like, I don't give a shit anymore. I don't care what people think of me. If I do anything, it's going to be for myself. But also, is that even true? I don't know. Sometimes I post something on Instagram. I'm like, this is definitely so I can try to catch a dick, hopefully. Like
catch one flying through the air.
Yeah.
You have your net out. You're ready.
Reel it in.
But multiple, hopefully. So I don't even know if I'm full of shit. But what I do know is that I have far less patience for other people's expectations of me. I'm just far more mature than I was in my 20s. Imagine that. Can you believe it?
Whoa.
And so I have to believe that for artists who are in their 30s, whatever way they are, whatever kind of like brand or vibe they're giving off, I have to believe they have more control over that, because they just all have like more wherewithal to like push back and challenge, you know, the people in the industry who are trying to cultivate an image for them. And they're just like, no, I don't want to be perceived that way. I want to exercise my agency more over how I'm perceived. How successful they are at that is something I'm not sure about, but I have to imagine that they do more to like push back on it and probably like succeed to some degree.
Yeah.
You'd hope. At the same time you say that, like I think in my head, but like as soon as you hit 18 up until basically your biological clock runs out, the worth that you have to our society at large is to be a sort of sexual object, you know? So it's at the same time, it's like, well, is it still... It's so hard to know, because I don't...
Are you saying like, are you holding on to that basically?
No, not necessarily like, are you holding on to that? That's not what I mean, but that maybe could be something. But I just mean more like, I think the pressure's still there regardless of if they're turning 20 or if they're turning 30 or if they're turning 40.
Yeah.
To be sexy.
I mean, look at J-Lo. She's 50 and she's hot as hell. There's no doubt about that.
No one holds it against her, actually. Very interesting point.
I just don't know what the, like, I don't think it ends at any point, that pressure for women to feel like they have to be this, like, something to gawk at or to look at in a...
Especially with MILF culture.
Yes. I don't know. I'm sure that plays a role as well. So it's hard to know. And I don't want to, you know, like stomp all over these people's agencies or say that they, like, you know, don't feel empowered when they do it if it's on their own terms, because obviously, like, power to you if you're doing it in that way, and it's totally up to the individual. But at the same time, it does feel like, okay, well, how do we know? How do we know unless they say it, that it's their own choice?
Yeah. A big thing that you can kind of, and this is not to like speculate on like who has agency and who doesn't, but I think also when you go into your 30s, the sexual elements of artists in their 30s, like a Lizzo or a SZA, feel a lot more natural. An artist like, who's in their 30s, like Katy Perry or
BB
Rexha or Taylor Swift now. Not that Taylor Swift is like very known for being explicitly sexual, but
she's not.
They're artists that are in their 30s, I think exude a lot more of like a natural kind of sexuality. And I think the reason for that is because you don't know how to be sexual when you're like 20, 21, 22. Like you're just still trying to figure it out. And like it's a little bit more for shock value because at least in public examples of this, it's like a lot of, especially the Miley stuff was used specifically for shock value. I know a lot of the early Britney addressing sexy was like trying to be a moment, or like geared to be a moment. And it's very interesting to see artists just sing about sex because it's part of their everyday life, as opposed to wanting it to be like a front page headline that this artist has a song with the F word in it, or this song is about walking side to side kind of thing.
I don't know why, AJ, this made me think of this. I heard about this study in Belgium in 2013, so maybe things have changed in the last 9 years, or 10 years, but new year. But apparently they analyzed like almost 10,000 scenes from almost 1,400 music videos and 180 programs on broadcast.
Right.
And they found that music videos, 40% of them had coded scenes that contained like sexualizing images. That made music videos more of a sexualizing genre than non-fictional programs and fictional programs on TV at the time. So this was like an analysis of like MTV basically, but in Belgium. Mm-hmm. It seems like music is hypersexualized even comparatively to sitcoms, mm-hmm. reality television, all of these different things, although maybe now reality TV might be less. But is it innate to music that we do this? Is there something in our culture that expects this of musicians regardless of the age and regardless of the time of year? You know, they're out there on New Year's with the ball dropping and like, you know, tidy whities and fucking like little bikinis or whatever. I don't know why I said tidy whities. But do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It seems to be something almost more, there's more pressure for a 30-year-old or a 20-year-old musician than a 30 or 20-year-old actor.
That's true, yeah.
Right. Because even very sexy actors of all genders, there's kind of like, I mean, for Hollywood, there's almost a prerequisite that you have to be traditionally attractive in order to make it in this industry, or you don't have to look like a model as long as you're a really amazing actor who's willing to do like character actor work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Those are kind of like the two categories, and there's often very little overlap between the two. But for even the very like traditionally sexy people in Hollywood, this is something that I talk about all the time on the Bechdel cast, but I think for women far more than men, because in movies and TV, women are often treated as just like set dressing in movies, mm-hmm. or if they do have an actual character, they are framed as like, you know, the girlfriend or the wife or the love interest, or, you know, some prize to be won by the male hero.
His wife.
But be that as it may, it does feel like something about music and music videos really just leans into that, because not only do you have these like hypersexualized artists who are women, you have male artists, especially there, and then some genres are bigger culprits of this than others. But if there are women in a music video of a male musician, they are even more sexualized because they're just like, you know, champagne is being poured on them and they're just like titties and butts are like wiggling in front of I sound like a million years old.
No, but it's true.
No, but they're literally there to be objects.
Yeah.
Like,
they're there to be objectified. They're there to be props and set dressing. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's something about like the music video as an art form, as a piece of media.
Even taking the male gaze away, like introducing something very similar, the gay gaze, which I know is not really caught on because we don't have a good name for it yet. But this something that I notice a lot that happens is even people who are not attracted to women.
Yes, this is a huge thing.
Will prefer to have a woman be hypersexualized in their music.
Yes.
Like that's a big thing that like
yes.
gay fans reward hypersexualization of women.
I've always noticed that. I don't know why.
I know that there have been some studies on it. I really should have studied up on it before this episode, but I totally just forgot about it up until now. But it's something that just really bothers me. It's something that I notice a lot. And it's something that's almost even weirdly inescapable, I feel, because of how conditioned everyone is.
We're queer, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm attracted to all genders, but
same.
It just feels almost inevitable to expect that and to want that because that's what everyone is always giving, because that's what's always being forced down our throats, and that's what's being told. It's like this is successful because she looks good. It's like you can always see people giving a lot less slack to artists who maybe flopped, but they didn't look great doing it. If they looked good, if they were serving while they were flopping, and it's like, then at least you can be like, oh, she was serving cunt, whatever.
Oh my God, it's so true.
It's a big thing. It's big on aesthetics. It's big on, having someone be visually appealing, and not to come for gays, because I love my community, but
come for gays. I'm sorry, but that was the phrasing.
I don't know how else to say it.
COME.
Yeah, not to COME at the gays, but
yes.
It's just it's very frustrating to see them almost be more misogynistic at times,
right.
because quote unquote they don't like need women, right? So it's like they can even be further culprits of objectifying them to the point of not having any female friends or whatever.
That's such an interesting phenomenon.
I don't know if the same thing happens like reverse with queer women. I don't think so.
Queer women objectifying men, do you mean?
Like, I was just thinking about the album cover for Sexy Back, or the single cover. Even in a song that's all about bringing sexy back.
Full suit.
He's in a full suit.
Yep.
There's not, the only skin showing are hands and face. Give
me those hands and face pics.
Where are your abs, Timberlake?
Yeah, seriously. I mean,
no, I'm just kidding.
Where's your bulge?
Yeah, where's your bulge?
I thought you were going to say balls.
Yeah, get your balls out.
Where are your balls?
Well, the balls are a part of the bulge.
The lower cleavage, the southern cleavage.
Show me the balls, Justin Timberlake.
Ugh, I don't want to see his balls.
I don't either.
But I found this quote that was interesting from Charles Darwin.
Wow. We're quoting old Chucky Dar.
OG feminist.
Yeah. So even apparently Charles Darwin highlighted the link between music and sex. There's been a long history.
Ahead of his time.
I mean, like, even women were fainting over, like, Franz Liszt. I've said this before on the podcast, but he had, like, this long hair. He was, like, the OG superstar.
Something sexy about playing piano.
He was playing piano. He's playing it so fast with these massive hands. Like, he had outrageously massive hands, which obviously is a turn on for women. And so, like, he would just play it so fast, whip his hair around, and, like, women were fainting and stuff. It's, like, where the term Beatles mania came from is listomania. So we already have had that lesson on this show. But for this one, he said in The Descent of Man that, quote, musical notes and rhythm were first acquired by the male and female progenitors of mankind for the sake of charming the opposite sex.
Music is horny. Music makes us horny.
Music is horny.
Music is so horny.
We use music as a tool to get other people horny.
Yep.
So maybe that is why.
Music's a horny little fucker.
It's so freaking horny.
Bonk music.
But then at the same time, we needed Britney to be a virgin. Like, what?
It's such a contradiction. Going back to the phenomenon of how certain demographics like perceive these like images of artists, of musicians. I wasn't totally aware of the phenomenon of gay men kind of being obsessed with like the objectification and sexualization of women, or maybe obsessed isn't the right word, but like what we were just talking about.
Participating in it, yeah.
Another phenomenon that I find fascinating as it relates to like a certain demographic perceiving a musician is that men who are attracted to women, particularly cishet men, being like, and to use like Britney Spears as an example, being like, oh yeah, I'd fuck Britney Spears, I'd have sex with her, but not engaging with her music. thinking that her music sucks, thinking that anyone who likes her music is a loser, which is like indicative of the way that media that is marketed toward women and girls, or media that has largely a female and or queer fan base, is so often ridiculed by men. And because like men's opinions are most valued by other men and society in general, that becomes like the popular opinion about that artist. So you have this like demographic of people who only like Britney Spears for her image, but not her art. Like they won't buy her album, they won't go to her concerts. If they do listen to her music, it's like in secret, because if they did it publicly or like around friends, all their like dude bro friends would be like, oh, you listen to Britney Spears, you're gay. And to these people, like that would be the worst insult. So it's like this wild thing where it's like, yeah, I'd have sex with Britney Spears, Mandy Moore, Christina Aguilera, all these women, but her music sucks. I think she sucks.
That is such a good point.
I hate it.
It's so telling.
I wonder if that still happens now.
Yeah, I remember I was a huge fan of Katy Perry with my, like, I think in around...
Was?
No, I still am. I'm a huge Katy cat. What am I saying? 2010, I remember 2010, 2011, something like that. I was like telling one of my best friends about how I really liked Katy's music or something like that. Or maybe it just like came on or something like that. And he was like, oh yeah, I love Katy Perry. She's like one of my favorite female artists. And I was like, really? Oh shit. Because this is a very like dude bro-y kind of guy. And he was like, yeah, she's so hot. I was like, and California Girls is very cleverly written.
Said no dude bro ever.
And that's undeniable.
I totally hear what you're saying. Also, I wonder if the same sorts of... I think we've moved forward a little bit in accepting women in society a little bit more and more. So I wonder if the same conversation happens amongst like 15-year-olds, 14-year-olds now or whatever about, you know, Dua Lipa or... you know, stuff like that. I'm not sure, because obviously I don't have friends that age.
I feel like Dua Lipa is the person that they would be like, that's the placeholder for the Katy Perry or the Britney Spears that we were just talking about. I feel like people would say that shit about Dua Lipa now is like, oh yeah, I like her. She's great because she's hot.
Yeah, probably. Especially if they're like Andrew Tate fans or something.
I feel like everything's so divisive now that it's really hard to tell what the consensus is in like high schools at the moment.
There's so much radicalization on like either side. Yeah. And I similarly don't have any teenage friends, and I take great pride in that as a 36-year-old person.
You're doing great, sweetie.
So I don't know. I've gotten, you know, I've reached that age where I'm like, what do young people like? What are the kids saying?
Calling them
days?
young people as well, you know?
Yeah. And that's a skill and a power, and that's a power move.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad you recognize that.
I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I'm so glad that I don't know what the kids are down with, you know? Maybe that's for the best.
Not the phrasing. The kids are down with.
Yeah, I don't... Well, because you watch like a film that's supposed to be set in high school, I think like senior year with Rebel Wilson. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but
no.
You shouldn't. It's okay. You shouldn't. So she like grows up in the 90s, and then she like goes into a coma, and then she wakes up when she's like 38 or something, and she has to go back to high school.
Oh, I remember this.
And the whole school is like, everyone is just like a Twitter user, which is just funny because it's like you can tell the writers just like went on Twitter to see what the kids were up to, and it's like that's a very specific kind of person. It's not everyone in the school, but I would be curious to see kind of how the conversations are being had in high schools now. Not the idea that they're all... I mean, I hope they're not all Twitter users, because that would be really terrifying, but...
Yeah.
No, they're all on Mastodon now, so I'm just kidding.
I mean, one or the other.
One or the other. I've downloaded both, but not made a Mastodon yet because I can't be bothered. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much to say about this topic. So maybe we'll probably revisit it in a lot of stuff in the future. But like, you know, we don't want to take away these people's agencies to make decisions, but we also have to know that they don't exist in a vacuum. They know that sex sells. A lot of them are signed to major labels. So I'm sure there's like a sort of pressure internally. Some people also, unfortunately, have terrible managers who use and abuse them. And that will probably never end.
I know that we talked a lot about people growing up in the public eye and like being sexual and having more sexual agency. And we were only talking about women. But the reason for that is like, if you compare it to men, what are the expectations of men when they grow up? You see like a young Justin Bieber and you're like, oh, he's a lady killer. See a Justin Timberlake doing a Future Sex Love Sounds. It's a natural progression. You know what I mean? There's no shock value in a young male artist that we've seen grow up from the same age, turning sexual or becoming sexual or having more sexual agency.
Right.
Also, I think the greatest enemy to us all in this is free market capitalism.
For sure.
In that, like,
that is all roads trace back to capitalism.
Yes.
Being the culprit for all of the problems with the world.
All of our woes. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, you know, with the whole sex sells line, like it's selling in the free market. It's selling in this supposedly, you know, whatever, free quote unquote. But like, I think, you know, if people see in the past, okay, this is what the system has done to make a successful female pop artist, I have to follow suit because I'm new competition and my aim is to get money, get paid.
Goal.
Also, a lot of these sexualizations, hypersexualization of these artists is also reinforcing Western beauty ideals. And
For sure.
Yep.
a lot of it is, you know, your proximity is to whiteness, the more accepted you'll be in society at large.
Whiteness, thinness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Especially thinness in the music industry. Oh my God.
Whiteness, thinness, and gender roles.
That should be the title. Every major artist that we know and love pretty much has had a very public eating disorder. So that's a whole nother thing as well. So the next one is quite a controversial thing. Hopefully we will be able to do it some justice in this episode, but if you'd like to hear us talk about it more, let us know. This is adopting hip hop aesthetics and sounds to become that good girl gone bad.
This is definitely, I think, the most notable way to, or I guess the most jarring way, I guess, to transition if you're white. I would argue that it doesn't only apply to white artists adopting hip hop aesthetics. I think Rihanna's eras where she turned quote unquote bad incorporated a lot more hip hop in her sound as well as featuring on more hip hop tracks. So I think it's definitely not just for white people, but not hip hop, not just for white people. But like, I think that a very attention grabbing way to transition so publicly is to kind of wear the aesthetics or things that have connotations with hip hop. And that's because I think there's a lot of connotations between hip hop aesthetics and being edgy.
Because society is mad racist.
But it's also a genre kind of designed to connote some of that stuff. Sure. So it's like, it's that specifically as opposed to R&B or etc. I'm also wondering, like, what are some of the other cultural connotations of hip hop that you think people are trying to attach to their brands when they do a bangers or a stripped or a reputation? Because the only word I could think of was edgy or like rebellious.
Party.
But I don't even think of hip hop exclusively as rebellious.
I also think there's just like a perceived coolness.
Yeah.
As it comes to hip hop and also just a broader kind of like Black culture, where there is a perceived coolness that so often gets appropriated by white people, and it's done to, again, just appeal to a larger audience, or I don't know, make them seem cooler or more relevant maybe, or again like edgier. I
think going into We Can't Stop, which was Miley's first like song of that era, I think there is some document somewhere out on the internet, like there's some quote of Miley saying that she wanted a black sound for this song.
Yikes.
And I remember the criticism around the music video for that song, which was that Black people are in the music video as set dressing. They are there as props, when all the focus is still on her, and it's just this really gross appropriative thing that sucks, much like the world sucking.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think in Miley's defense, not that I'm like out here to defend cultural appropriation, but I think so she was friends with like Amazon Ashley, for example, who's the really, really, really tall woman in the video, which I know was a big part of that because even in the VMA's performance, there was something especially egregious about Amazon Ashley turning around so Miley could slap her butt while she twerked.
Right.
But I think it is worthwhile to say that like she is friends with Ashley. She is friends with Mike Will Made It, who made the music with her. And that's not to say that it's right, but it's interesting how those things, they don't really matter. Like if you're talking about the interpersonal lives of these people and their like personal merit, it might matter, but it doesn't matter on a large scale thing because that doesn't come across.
I had no idea about those friendships until you said them just now.
Yes, exactly.
So.
And if I didn't read one thing on the internet about this, like it wouldn't matter. Like I wouldn't know either. Yeah. So it's like those things never come across. I'm sure like a lot of people when they're doing something that they in their mind think is something rational because it's like, they're like, oh yeah, like if you were doing a school project and you did something like that, wow, I feel like that'd be a very jarring school project or a little small documentary or film or something. I feel like that on a small scale might make a lot more sense to that person, but on a large scale, it's like you can only pick apart what's being presented to you, like very like at face value. And you can't assume that people are consenting to this kind of objectification, and you can't assume that people aren't just paid off to. The nuance is lost. No nuance.
Again, people really struggle with nuance.
People struggle, but then it's also like it's struggling to communicate nuance. It's struggling to receive nuance, but then it's also like you can't make a product like this and expect that everyone's going to see the nuance either.
Right. It's so complicated. Like Caitlin, I think you made a really good point when you said that there's like a sort of cool connotation culturally that they're trying to sort of latch on to. We live in a globalized society that has exchanged so much in terms of everything, we're constantly like giving and taking, but I think that there was a lot more probably taking with that. I can't really remember the music video like in this moment.
What did Miley give to Black culture?
Yes.
It's not a question we can answer,
no.
But I'm curious to hear.
But it's interesting when you think about like, I guess in my head, when Miley did this whole era of Miley, for me, I was thinking, okay, well, she had the one extreme of being this like girl who's on a TV show with her dad, who is like, singing country music and bubblegum pop music and all these different things. Just this little girl from Nashville, Smiley Miley. And she needed the other extreme in her team's mind to be able to fall eventually somewhere in the middle. It was probably calculated in that it was, and this is all just, me hypothesizing, but calculated that, okay, we need to do something the opposite of Hannah Montana. So what's the opposite of Hannah Montana? Okay, it's this entire image, this entire song. Everything about this is the opposite so that we can eventually fall somewhere in the middle. Because with Wrecking Ball, while that went really well, I think they saw how pulling further to like extremes was giving her the kind of, I guess, reset that she was looking for. That's my speculation.
Yeah. Right. I would say Miley I know that she had a lot of agency during that era from what she said.
I also read that she felt at a certain point that she was being sexualized.
Yeah, she was being sexualized, and she said that they were trying to make her into the white Nicki Minaj, whoever they were. Because when she said that, I was actually very taken aback. I think she said it in an interview, but I didn't know about that until recently, actually through Pop Heads. And I was always under the impression that that was her choice. Especially in 2013, it's hard to not to be in the music industry and not see the rise of hip hop in mainstream culture and to not be influenced by that in some sort of way and to not like enjoy it. I know as a musician, it's sometimes like you just want to do everything that you like to listen to. You want to make your music similar to what you listen to. And there are certain lines, obviously, that you can't cross. And I think until someone crosses them pretty poorly, it's hard to know what you can and can't do until you have a bunch of people people telling you, yeah, that was not okay. That was way too far. And then there are people who definitely lean into that even further because they like the public outrage. It definitely helps them. The no publicity is bad publicity. With Miley doing it and getting a lot of backlash in 2013, it was very different than when Christina did it in 2002. I don't remember this outpour of rage that Christina Aguilera was literally orange and trying to very, very closely associate herself with blackness or snuggle up next to the idea of blackness as edgy, as cool. I wonder if that's a big social media difference.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah, I know that Taylor did it after Miley and Christina and didn't get nearly as much backlash as either of them, but I wonder if that was just because she was doing it mostly in the music and not in the aesthetics, and like if that's the line that maybe, you know, not to say that that's right, but to say that, like, you know, if Taylor Swift has this hip hop song with Future and Ed Sheeran, is that somehow more commendable than Miley doing We Can't Stop? Is the only egregiousness with Miley going into the music video and the performances of that and the imagery of that? It's very interesting to see where people draw the line and at what point they're like, this is way too far.
I think music, you're more allowed to dabble in all sorts of stuff. Like, I mean, is there a pop song without trappy hi-hats by...
Oh yeah, for that, like,
do you know what I mean?
2017 to 2019, it was like every pop song.
I think in music, there's much more of an openness to, like in the sonics itself, an openness to a sort of like cultural exchange. I don't know. I think maybe the visual aspects are a little bit more of a line. Yeah, I think that's...
Or is it just more obvious? Is it more egregious or is it more obvious?
That's a good question. Yeah, I can't really put my finger on it, but like, do you remember that Paris Hilton song?
Stars Are Blind, yes.
Which is
yeah, wasn't that like ska reggae?
It's like reggae, yeah.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, woohoo. It might be kind of like a blend of the two.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, woohoo, that's a cool song. But this was also like pre-social media age, where prior to social media, marginalized people did not have much of a voice generally in being able to push back and challenge all the fuckery that was going on because of so much gatekeeping. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I live beside a firehouse and there are always sirens happening.
It's okay. I was actually wondering if that was me, so no worries.
Oh, no, it is me. But there has been and still is so much gatekeeping as it relates to who do we hire to be music journalists? Who do we hire to just like review media and art? Because it's historically been cishet white men. And so all of the criticism has come through that lens. Not all, but like a large amount has come through that specific, very limited.
Yeah, similar to history.
Similar to history.
Yeah.
Wow. So true.
Written by the people named Victor.
Right. Yeah, it hasn't been until social media platforms have been in the cultural zeitgeist that more people had more of a voice and that people started listening to those voices. Pre like Twitter era is what a wild time, but also post Twitter era, what a horrible time.
It's
the
true.
world sucks.
Terrible in different ways.
Post Elon Twitter as well. Oh my god, the worst.
Oh, even worse.
Oh god. Just when I started using Twitter.
And I'm still on Twitter every day because I'm a menace. But I have a complicated relationship with this question because I'm so inspired by music of historically Black origin. And you know, I think also there's so much music nowadays that you would have to attribute to either African or Black American communities or queer communities around the US, like disco and house music.
Yep. Literally like every genre of rock, country.
Yeah. Well, country actually was white in that it was segregated.
Oh yeah, like the term. Yeah.
But you know, I don't want to segregate music like it used to be, like quite literally, by saying like, oh, you know, Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande or whoever
can't touch hi-hats. Yeah.
Yeah, because who am I to say, first of all, but then secondly, like music is probably the easiest cultural I hate to say commodity, but thing that I can think of that would be like interchanged and exchanged and stuff. Adopting the hip hop aesthetics, I think, is more questionable than adopting the hip hop sounds. But then at the same time, you kind of have to go case by case, because you have people like Eminem, who for now, 20, 30 years has
because
been...
of the cosigns.
Yeah.
Adopted, yeah. And like JoJo too, how by and large, you know, from what I've seen, it's like she's been very quickly adopted into being able to make R&B music because she pays her respects.
Yeah, or like Tina Marie, the only white Motown artist.
Oh, right.
Like it's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. Like, obviously the cultural systemic racism and not uplifting Black voices from people of color and marginalized communities at large is the biggest problem. And I think once we start addressing those things within the government, come on, and within like...
Come on the government.
You can do better, government.
COME.
Yeah, COME government. I don't know. It's such a tough one, but I think Taylor Swift got away with it. Ariana Grande gets away with it. Other people get away with it because they're more, I don't know, respectful? Maybe Miley's was perceived as disrespectful.
I think there is a big element of whether you are, which is, it's difficult as an artist because pop is specifically like a blend of all different genres. And so as an artist, it's very common to want to go to one genre for one project and then go to another genre for another project.
Based on what you're listening to.
I know, I feel that all the time.
Yeah.
And wanting to play around with all your influences and be able to explore all of those, all the depths of the earth on every corner. So it's hard to stay in one kind of lane your whole career because people also get bored about that as a woman in music.
Oh my God. You always have to transform yourself.
Yeah. So thank you, Madonna, for that. But I guess my point is that the difference with Miley and like an Ariana is that Ariana has always been some sort of an R&B artist. I think with the exception of like, I think a lot of her albums, the singles will be pop songs, except for her like first and like most recent album. And like all the album tracks will be R&B, like heavily R&B influenced. And so I think with JoJo as well, they really do just want to make R&B music. They really love it. You know, this is the kind of their bread and butter, as opposed to artists like Miley, who like came in, did hip hop for an era, and then went immediately to country, went immediately to far, far into whiteness. Sorry, I won't say immediately into country. She went to psychedelics first, but like pit stop at psychedelics, but later abandoned the kind of image.
But then Taylor to Lover.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's another one too.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised at the lack of pushback on that, to kind of lean into hip hop aesthetics for your bad girl era and then immediately ditch them.
Yeah, I think people were more mad about her just like pitting women against women, quote unquote, or whatever. Like that whole discussion was more so than like any sort of delving into a different genre. Probably because she had already done that sort of before, like treading the line between country and pop throughout her whole career. So she could just tread the line again, but just in something else.
Yeah.
Another hypothesis.
I'm so excited to get into this last section. I don't know if I have too much to say about this because I know that we've covered a lot already, but I think it probably has bled over into this. But number 3, the way to transform yourself from a good girl to a bad girl is controversy and headlines.
We're talking Britney Spears. We're talking actually everybody.
Katy Perry, who I guess falls into this category since even though she came out of the gate publicly being very edgy with You're So Gay and I Kissed a Girl being her first 2 songs.
Well, no, she started with a Christian album that nobody listened to. Yeah,
under Katie Hudson.
Yes.
Her real name.
Yes.
Rebranding. It's very interesting because she grew up very religious and this was kind of like a fuck you, I'm going to do what I want to everyone who kind of like knew her as a person. But obviously when you're introduced introduced to her starting off, kicking off edgy. That's just how you see her in general.
Right.
Which is funny because it got all stripped back with the next album in terms of the edginess. But I think I Kissed a Girl and bringing up those conversations about queerness in media and just being in the headlines and starting that controversy is a really good way to get people to see you as the bad girl, as opposed to, you know, if she had just done the casual pop rock Christian music that she was doing before.
Right.
If I Kissed a Girl was the same exact song without the title and lyric, like just all the lyrics were changed, I'm just thinking about how differently Katy Perry would be perceived right out the gate.
If the song was her as Katy Perry, but the lyrics were "I kissed a boy,"
Yeah,
I liked it. It would have had none of the like
Spark.
Yeah, people would have just been like, yeah, most songs are about hetero people wanting to kiss each other. Who cares?
Yeah.
And I don't know, is Katy Perry queer?
She said that that song was based on real experiences and that it was more than a kiss, and that it was like written to, I guess, be more relatable to people who wanted to experiment, but like it was more of just like a sexual encounter with a woman.
I see.
But that she is not like labeled her sexuality, and she uses the term ally to refer to herself.
She is pulling from an experience she had. Okay, yeah, then, I mean, I think there are still a lot of things that you could criticize about that by basically like using queerness, even though that is not how you identify as a person, to propel your career forward or to like get yourself going, because you probably know that is going to get people to notice you.
Headlines.
So there's still, I think, a lot to be wary of when people do that. I don't know. It's once again, there's nuance there.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is like her as a songwriter writing I Kissed a Girl about a real experience is different than a label choosing to make it the lead single for a debut artist and send it. Like if that was just an album track on one of the boys, it would be taken very differently. She definitely plays around with a lot of like gender identity and things about sexuality on the album. So it wouldn't be out of place, but to make it the single and have that be like the song. Maybe it was always intended to be the debut single. Maybe it was written and then label execs were like, that's gonna sell. Let's put that out first, you know?
It's confusing that they thought it would sell anyway, because like this was during Bush era, wasn't it? This was still like George Bush.
Which kind of makes it so badass. I mean, that song has a very complicated history because it's like queer people either love it or they hate it in terms of like what it represents. Because for a lot of people, it was a sexual awakening and a big point of representation.
Yeah, because I was like 11 and like just like a queer little 11-year-old. I was like, yes, this is my MySpace song. Like it was kind of cathartic for me. And I was like, ooh, like maybe that could be me. Like when I go clubbing or whatever.
Yeah. And you still have queer artists like Fletcher, like saying it was like one of their favorite songs. They sampled it and then reinterpolated it in their own music.
Yeah.
No, interpolated. That's...
Because they interpolated, but they also reinterpreted. So reinterpolated. There you go.
Right. It was also like how you were saying, Caitlin, about like sort of using it as a tool to grab headlines. I don't know if it was written with that intent. This was also shortly after Britney Spears had her public meltdowns, and there was a really interesting and horrible NME review, which is like a UK music magazine who has supported me in the past, so shout out Enemy. But they did a review of her album in 2008. Okay, while normally seeing queer stuff in media would be cause for celebration, one of the boys confirms that Perry is no genuine provocateur, rather another ambitious woman reared on a childhood of church performance. Like Beyonce and Christina, she clearly fell more deeply in love with the spotlight than Christianity and has become the perfect peg to fit in America's gaping starlit hole. Britney's Chernobyl has changed America's chart needs, and this self-aware 23-year-old now offers nostalgic, contrived controversy rather than Spears' awkwardly reality-based disaster. By Kissing a Girl, Katy Perry offered a country complicit in Spears' transformation from angel to slut, a new pariah to love and hate. visually marketed somewhere between Juno and Dita Von Teese. In reality, Perry is about as alternative as a Bratz doll with a safety pin through its nose. And
wow.
Scene.
Damn.
Shots fired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got her ass.
Yeah. First of all, it's crazy talking about someone like that.
Talking about a person.
Yes, a human being, and still giving her like 1.5 stars or whatever. But like, I was shocked to hear the sort of relationship between Britney Spears and how they were like, oh, this is just a much more digestible controversy. We love drama. Americans, we are messy, messy bitches. We love drama. And I think this was like a sort of more digestible drama, and then teens could latch onto it because it was like an FU to their conservative parents in the Bush era or whatever.
I guess in contrast to Britney, if that's the lens that they want to put this through, Katie was doing this on purpose. This was meant to be publicized, and this was meant to be glamorized, as opposed to Britney shaving her head and, you know, the whole umbrella thing, which we know is it's public information that was a setup and that was not in her control, and that was staged by her father. Feeling the need to throw that out there. But it's interesting to kind of pit these two ideas against each other, because controversy that's not sad is very interesting. Like there's a lot of headlines and controversy around Britney at the time, and then to have this new controversy that you can love or hate, but it's eventually trivial because kissing a girl is so much different than drug abuse or anything with much heavier undertones. It makes sense why it seemed like a fresh controversy, quote unquote. And then also, if you think about queer representation in media, I'm thinking about how a lot of queer media is depressing, and or like up until that point, it was like you had tragedies were mostly what queer films were centered around and stuff like that.
I'm sorry, Will and Grace.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of Will and Grace too as I was saying this, but
the tragedy of Will and Grace.
But I mean, like a lot of queer media was focused around tragedy and, you know, and the AIDS epidemic and how sad it was to be gay. And I think this kind of like, no, it can be fun to be gay. It can be fun and flirty. That kind of message, I'm sure, even if that wasn't the intention of the people marketing it or of Katie herself, could have been the reason why so many people latched onto it at the time.
Sure. I wonder if another thing is the fetishization of girl on girl, like sex and kissing.
Yes.
I think that was a huge thing that plays into male gaze.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you look like Katy Perry, a very like traditionally hyper feminine woman.
23.
You know, conjuring this image of her kissing another, probably like similar, like
equally attractive.
I'm sure the gaps that people are filling in their brain are like, yeah, it's these two very traditionally beautiful women kissing each other in a way that I'm like fantasizing about while I jerk off. And I'm now doing an imitation of cishet men once again.
Classic.
So again, was that the intent? I don't know, but I feel like there has to be something in the back of these people's minds of like, we know that this is something that people fetishize a lot. We know that it's like this fantasy, and that's probably going to make for more sales of the album or, you know, views on the music video and stuff like that. So I feel like that is something a bit more sinister to like exploit that fetishizing of that. That's a more sinister reason that song in particular like resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
100%. That reminds me of like, I guess maybe the industry saw the success of Britney, Madonna, Christina kissing each other.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, I guess we could sort of replicate those big attention grabbing headlines, but in now song format.
Yeah.
So.
Queer baiting the song.
Queer baiting the song was also Girls, I think, the Rita Ora song, which is also based on a true experience, but was compared to I Kissed a Girl and didn't do well because everyone was like, we've already done this. We did this like 9 years ago and we don't want to do it again, I guess was the consensus. If
at the time, I don't know, like Justin Timberlake and like, I don't know, Flo Rida shared a kiss.
Oh, I'd eat that shit up. That'd be hot.
Yes.
Now I have a new fantasy. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I just don't know, like, you know, how well that would have gone down, because there's way more homophobia directed toward man on man sexual expression versus women on women.
Weirdly, though, I think counterpoint, if that happened in 2008, I kind of feel like we wouldn't know about it today, or it'd be like something that a lot of people, like big pop fans, bring up, but like not something the general public knows. My theory is that it would go under publicized, and the things that would get publicized and the people who would be, you know, raked over the mud because of homophobia would be the Adam Lambert kissing his like backing dancer or his guitarist or something on stage.
Because he was perceived as gay. And I know that he is like open.
Someone who is publicly out.
I don't think he was at the time, but
I think by the time this happened, he was, because I think he came out right before the American Idol finale. But regardless, someone who is queer and publicly or it's general consensus that they're queer, and then, which is such a silly fucking term.
General consensus.
Sounds so ridiculous.
I'm detecting gay.
Yeah, I think we all agree. Gay?
We all know you're gay.
I know what you are.
The new, like, I know what you did last summer, but
yeah. I'm thinking like Whitney Houston right now. That's the name of the dog.
Oh God.
But anyway, so I feel like if this thing happened between two guys kissing and it was pretty obvious that it didn't mean anything, just like the Britney, Madonna, Christina kiss, I feel like that would have just gone so under the radar. It would have been something that like people would bring up as like a fun fact. Like, did you know?
Nah.
It would be, well, it's so hard to fathom because it like never happens. Or if it does happen, it's always played. If a man kisses another man, like two hetero men kiss for like a publicity stunt, it's always a joke.
Yep.
It's always like, I don't know, Seth Rogen being like, hey, Paul Rudd, let's kiss. I don't know if that ever happened or if I'm just conjuring this from my imagination.
Yes. Manifesting.
It happened probably so many times on SNL.
Right.
Yes.
It would be like, ha ha ha, two men kissing. Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah.
So it's like there's like a different tone associated with it.
That's so true.
Or if it's two men kissing because they romantically and sexually are interested in each other, the tone then, according to society at large, especially, you know, years and decades ago, would be, that's disgusting. So once again, the world is bad.
World sucks. Yeah. I think it's vulnerability that changes the game. If you're homophobic and you're able to attack someone on something that they actually are insecure about, like would have a reason to have an insecurity for, that's just like you're able to push your agenda that way. Whereas if you are going against a straight man and a straight man jokingly kissing, I feel like you would just be screaming at a wall, because it's like, okay, we promise we won't do it again as a joke. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
just wanted to get onto some other controversies before we close this section out. Like, for example, back to Miley, when she was still with Disney, smoked some salvia, supposedly, though I do think it was probably weed.
What is salvia?
It was the like legal high at the time. Dirty weed, basically.
It was like worse for you, but legal.
Cool.
So her defense was it wasn't weed, it was salvia.
But I'm sure it wasn't salve. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm sure.
I hope for her sake it wasn't.
Because literally, who has ever smoked salvia? I've never even heard of that.
Honestly.
Just like, Miley. That's the only reason I know what it is.
But you know who smokes weed? But you know who smokes weed? Everybody. So, like, who's out there being like, no, I'm smoking salvia. And it's like, that's barely a thing. No one does that.
If someone said that to me, I would assume they're making a Miley Cyrus reference. So that's actually really...
Not like telling you a real thing.
She owns a drug now.
But so that happened in 2010. And then 4 years later, she was at the European Music Awards and she smoked weed on stage.
It's like a big way to assign yourself as a bad girl or a rebel, but not through sexualization or hip hop aesthetics, just by smoking weed or doing anything kind of for a headline.
Your proximity to like drug culture more generally as well. I guess that's still like a thing. I don't know if that's ever going to go away. I think it's like another thing that like, you know, sort of an extension of the cool factor is like drug culture.
Drugs are undeniably cool.
It's true.
I get it.
Pretzel sticks and all.
And yeah, snorting all those pixie sticks.
I'm getting so fucking high from my pretzel rod.
Bro, you mind passing the pretzel?
Yeah, you want a hit of this pretzel?
But bite it off first. I don't want to see it. I want to share saliva.
You get COVID that way.
It's so weird how like now in 2023 to think back on how that was a huge controversy, and now I think it's still maybe relatively headline grabbing, but more like, I don't know, Snoop Dogg has made his own strand of weed and things like that. You know, it's right. Headline grabbing in the way of like, I'm selling a product.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, with weed especially, because so many states have decriminalized it, and you can just go into any corner drugstore basically and buy it. Look at me sounding like a million years old again. But yeah, so if stars really want to be controversial with their drug use, they need to start on black tar heroin.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Are you listening, future stars?
Billie Eilish, get on it. Olivia Rodrigo, if I don't see you on black tar heroin in like 30 days,
loser alert,
you're gonna flop.
We need an intervention so she starts doing black tar heroin.
I'm glad we're all on the same page here.
But it's funny that's one. I wonder what the 2034 or 2050 headline grabbing thing will be, because you could do anything now. You can get your
your nips can be showing.
You can get your balls out.
I thought you were gonna say something like legal, and you're like, you can just legally get your balls out now.
You can show your balls, you can show your titties.
You can smoke weed and you can show your balls.
I was trying to do a callback, but it was a real loose like callback.
Yeah, your bulge and your balls.
Your bulge and your bong.
Here's what I think, that we will not even survive to live 2050 because the water wars and environmental catastrophes will have wiped out most of humanity by then.
But not this podcast.
No.
Not this podcast.
We'll be going from the bunkers.
It's going forever.
Yes.
That's the biggest proponent for the cloud, is that water can't touch it.
But what do you think of like manufactured controversies? I guess sort of going off of the potential of what Katy Perry was doing. I think that's kind of a big thing that people will do. Like you see it a lot in obviously reality TV. In order to get viewers, is they will manufacture drama. Like AJ and I have both participated in different reality TV programs. The one that we did together didn't air because it was a demo episode.
Rude.
Thankfully. Oh my God. No, I was so grateful. It was never supposed to air. It was to see a proof of concept. But I think people have found the transition from a good girl to a bad girl by manufacturing controversy is a very helpful way to make that transition.
It is effective.
Yeah.
It's so effective. And we see that in lots of industries. It's not just the music industry that likes to manufacture controversy. Obviously.
The chef industry with the menu.
Yes.
Publicity stunt.
The Guy Fieri Flavortown publicity stunt. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder what the next controversies will be besides Olivia Rodrigo turning to black tar heroin. But I think
classic trope.
Oh, Olivia.
Happens all the time. Well, to answer your question as far as like how do we feel about using that as a tool
yes,
to kind of perpetuate this transition from good girl to bad girl, I think it depends on just what it is. I think a lot of people use something like a mental health episode or drug addiction or some other thing that related to like declining mental health and exploiting that, which is like mental health issues, which is something that like people deal with all the time and struggle with, and the stakes are very high oftentimes with that, and to like use that or stage something or exploit mental health as like a publicity stunt, I think is really harmful and disgusting. If you're like, I'm gonna post a picture of me with my titties out on my Instagram because I want to do that and it was my idea,
also harmful and disgusting.
Fine.
Oh, sorry.
Horrible. How could you?
Sorry, we're on a different page here.
It's all about like not exploiting other people's issues, not doing anything racist or homophobic or anything else that harms marginalized people, But if you're just like doing something goofy and it's on your terms, I don't know how effective it'll be, but I don't know. I think it just depends. But I think in most cases, something staged like that has a lot of problematic implications.
Yeah.
So probably not the best idea.
As much as we want to, you can never really affect how your work is perceived and how your work is accepted.
Right.
So, for example, you know, going back to I Kissed a Girl real quick, we'll never know if that song for sure had intentions of being scandalous, or if it was a song that someone saw, was like, I see the potential for this, and then marketed it in a certain way. We'll never know what small incidents that the artist didn't have control over, like Britney's staged breakdown. We'll never know what effect that had on people, because even that happening, it was meant to perceive a certain message, and then it could have done the opposite. You know, it's hard to always be able to tell what's going to happen.
Right.
So to use it all willy-nilly and kind of try to get a certain result through using other people's pain or other people's actual struggles is definitely very harmful, and definitely it's always very interesting to see how people end up reacting to these things, because it's never exactly how you'd expect.
Right.
Even in like the Daily Mail or the Sun or these like, you know, rag kind of publications, they will just take someone posting their titty on Instagram, for example, as like a headline, you know, because sex sells. Back to that again. Like, you know, the media is helping to perpetuate these sorts of controversies, ideas about women and the roles that they play in society. Like, how much of a role do you think media plays in the public's overall perceptions of artists and their perceived or overt controversies? And how much of a role does the public play in how the media covers these artists?
Ooh.
It is a vicious cycle.
You have bloggers like Perez, who definitely influence the audience. And then you also have publications that are literally just retweeting people, or like putting up a list of tweets about something and being like,
Yes.
this is how people felt about this.
With like 2 sentences in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there definitely is more of an exchange now, I think, than previously, like before Twitter.
I think that because the people kind of behind the scenes who do so much to shape the image of each artist, that is then viewed and interpreted by the media. So, you know, critics and journalists and, you know, people who have like opinions with authority, like people who can speak with like quote unquote authority on the matter. And then you just have the masses, just like the public, the fans, or not, the haters, you know, or people indifferent, you know, the whole spectrum of people. It is such a like a kind of cyclical, like we are influenced by the critics' opinions. Sometimes critics will be influenced by just like how a fan base reacts to a musician. I don't know. I'd have to do some serious scientific studies.
Women in STEM, here we go.
Yes. I don't know. I think it's so hard to know. That's such a cop-out answer.
It's true.
But I don't know. I think it's all just sort of like cyclical, and again, like how much of the musician's image is of their own design, how much is it conforming to what they think people want, how much is it them conforming to what the like cultivators of their image want.
True. It's like a film. There are like millions of people working on
So many moving parts. Yeah.
And I guess what you were saying earlier too about journalists being influenced by the people, they're people too. So it's like they have friends and sisters and brothers and, you know, people they see down at the pub, and it's like they could be talking about something specifically, and then that influences like the way that people are on the streets are talking about it are going to influence the people on the streets who have a pen and paper.
I also think that they, like, journalists just try to give the people what they want, and so it's all based on perception.
It's a good way to keep your job, unfortunately.
Right.
You know, like I said at the start, folks, we're not having any answers for you, just more questions.
Yeah. We're here to confuse you further.
Yes. If you have any answers that you feel strongly about, let us know in the comments below.
But if you want all the answers to feminism, subscribe to my Patreon.
So thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been insightful.
My pleasure.
If people want to follow you or find out more about what you're doing, where should they go?
You should go to my Instagram or my Twitter, because I am outrageously still on that platform.
Same.
At Caitlin Durante, Caitlin with a C. I also am on TikTok because I'm young, I'm cool, I'm hip. And I do pretty much exclusively a bit there where I re-edit the endings of iconic movies or movies that have an iconic ending. And then I put a certain song over it to really make you think about life.
I've never seen your TikToks now, but I'm so curious.
I'm very curious.
I'm not gonna spoil anything.
Yeah, no spoilers.
But if you like the way Shrek ends,
oh my God, I knew it was going to be Shrek. I knew.
if you're a fan of the song accompanied by Shrek's ending, you're gonna love these videos that I post.
I'm following you immediately.
And more importantly, please listen to my podcast. We have very similar discussions, but on movies. Each episode is a different movie, and we analyze movies through an intersectional feminist lens. So check us out. It's me and my co-host, Jamie Loftus.
Shout out, Jamie.
And that's Bechtel Cast.
Yeah. And if you want to follow me, you can find me at AJ Marks Official on all my socials and as AJ Marks on all streaming services, music streaming services.
And I am currently in the process of rebranding BBs, so I am confusing right now. But if you want to follow me, you can find me on all social media as Solaginto. So that is SOLAGUINTO. It's my last name, so there it is.
Your own transition from good girl to bad girl.
It's true, just by adding my second last name.
Where's the black tar heroin?
No!
Where's the balls?
No! Where's my bulge?
I want to see bulge.
I'm waiting.
She's giving bulge. No, I'm still Sola on streaming platforms for now because you can't make a profile until you release music, and I haven't released anything under this new name yet.
It's tricky.
But if you want to find my old music, just look up Thin Line, all one word, Sola, and then you can click on my profile and listen to all my little goodies on there. And thanks once again to Caitlin for coming on. Thank you, Noah, for the theme music. Make sure you rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on right now. And yeah, okay, bye.
Bye.